Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before we rank each episode against each other. Today's episode is Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-Kun, Episode 2, Say Hello to the New Heroine. The episode in a nutshell briefly summarizes exactly what happens within this episode. The beginning of this episode picks up from the post-credit scene of the first episode, and that is with Mikoshiba being invited over to Nozaki's with Sakura. And basically, when they first meet, Mikoshiba doesn't leave the best impression on Sakura because he's trying to play like the Prince Playboy character, except he's a little bit too delicate for that. So as soon as he says something, he gets super embarrassed by it, but he tries to play it cool and does that anyways. Anyways, they end up back at Nozaki's house, and he basically, again, trying to play cool, tells Sakura that, he's the senpai, and if she doesn't get anything, don't ask him about it. He doesn't want to help her. Meanwhile, then he spends the entire time where she's perfectly capable of doing her beta job, basically trying to be noticed because he really wants to be asked for help. So basically doing the opposite of what he said. Eventually, Nozaki interferes and tells Sakura to please ask Mikoshiba something because he really, really wants to help her. So she asks him about doing the beta on a character's hair, and he then gets like really arrogant and is like, "Oh, you don't even know that," before like explaining it to her. And then she just basically makes noises at the appropriate spots while she continues her work, and he's super pleased about it. Then she goes to get drinks for everybody. He gives his order, and then he ends up following her to the vending machine. And she basically turns to him and is like, "You do know giving me your order was pointless if you were going to follow me anyways." Then they all sit together and watch a game show that has to do with drawing things from memory. So then they decide to play their own version of the game. And of course, Nozaki's art style is manga style. Sakura's is more classical artwork and realistic drawing, and then Mikoshiba very childish on all of the pictures, and this makes Sakura wonder what he does. And he then shows her, so Nozaki draws a character, and then he draws in the special effects background, and he draws in like a bunch of the flowers. And this really impresses Sakura because they're so detailed and small and really well drawn. That is also when, so then basically, that's the first day that they meet. Then the next day at school, Sakura is asking Nozaki how he came to become friends with somebody like Mikoshiba, or Mikurin as she started to call him. And he explains that originally he was just observing him for inspiration on a character, and that eventually through observation they ended up becoming friends. And she asks him which character, and it turns out that he is the heroine of the manga Let's Fall in Love. And then when you see then she basically like reads some of the characters' lines and realizes that the heroine really does resemble Mikoshiba, which I think starts to change her impression of him a bit. And they end up becoming a little bit closer, though Mikoshiba does continue to say things and then immediately get embarrassed by what he said, which is adorable, though again, Sakura never seems to be impressed by it. That's the first half. The second half, Nozaki mentions that he would like to maybe bring in a new character to the manga, however, without somebody to model a character after, they all end up as the hero or the love interest, Suzuki, and there's a little skit with the manga of him drawing basically the character, the friend, and the rival all identical, and then trying to make Mamiko choice between them, which obviously would not work. So Sakura thinks about it and decides to introduce her friend Yuzuki Seo to Nozaki as a character, and she starts by saying that she's always being chased by someone. And he imagines her being chased by a bunch of boys who are in love with her. Then we see reality and she's being chased by the teachers because she was tardy and basically laughing in their faces. Then, she mentions how Seo has a lot of friends, and we see a girl approach her bragging about how she worked and worked really hard, saved up her money, and got this bag. And Seo's like, that is so cool. I love the bag. Oh, but my really old guy, tacky neighbor happens to have the same one. Congrats, you match. And this girl gets like so upset. And Nozaki's like, she has to be doing this on purpose. But she isn't. She's just oblivious. And then she's asked to help out with the basketball team. So he's like, oh, she must be great at sports. That's the shoujo manga connection. And then she ends up being an example of exactly what not to do. She commits fouls, she has no teamwork, and basically the basketball team uses her to basically practice facing an annoying opponent and also to reconfirm the importance of teamwork. And the more he looks at her, he's like, this girl is repulsive to him. Like, he gets irritated by her. Then, because she was tardy, she has to carry notebooks, and Nozaki, who is observing her, ends up getting dragged into it as well. And then as they're carrying the books, a teacher, like a counselor, comes after her and she basically leaves the notebooks in Nozaki's care, promising to be back, but she doesn't come back. So that's where Sakura finds him. And then oh, wait, sorry. Let's reverse a little bit. So they're helping with the notebooks, and as they start carrying the notebooks, she does her self-observation about how, she thinks like that she's a cute girl, and then she's walking and she's like, people ask me for help all the time, as she basically blocks the camera for a bunch of guys trying to take a group photo. Then she's like, I'm really considerate, and she walks over a wet sign, leaving footprints across it. And then she's like, I'm really good at reading situations, and somebody's trying to hand a love letter, and she just basically like lifts their arm up to walk under the arms in between these two people. And he's just looking at her like, is she for real? Then the notebooks, then she has to run away from the counselor and leaves the notebooks in his care, doesn't come back. That's when Sakura finds him. And he basically, when he's like, trying to figure out what she saw in Seo as shoujo manga. She's like, I haven't even said anything yet, but he keeps getting stuck on the oblivious part. And then he finds out the truth, which is Sakura brings him to Seo's club work, which is what she feels is the shoujo manga aspect of Seo. And upon entering the choir club, he hears like an amazing voice, and it turns out that it's Seo singing and that she is the choir club's Lorelai, which is what Chio or Sakura thinks is the shoujo manga like thing, and all Nozaki can react with is that it has to be a fraud because it's so opposing to what Seo acts like. But in the end, we do get a post-credit scene where Sakura is bragging about introducing her friend to become, a character in Nozaki's manga. Or sorry, no, this is pre-credits. They're back at Nozaki's house. She's bragging about it. Mikura then brings up the manga pages, and Seo was turned into a really rude boy character in the manga because that's really all she would fit in with on a regular basis. And then we get the credits, and then the post-credit scene is Sakura asking Mikoshiba if he knows anybody who would be a good shoujo manga character, and he claims he himself would be before getting really embarrassed. But then she does look at the manga again and goes, yeah, fair thing. He is actually the heroine, so he was a shoujo manga character. He just doesn't know it. It's now time to rank the episode, and we will start with ranking on our mostly objective ranking list, which uses set values to determine the score, and then move on to the personal ranking list, which uses my personal opinion to rank the episode. So for our mostly objective rank values, I highlighted those that applied within the chart. Good news is no negatives applied within this episode. And then we have our first point, which is for our manga supporting character introduction, which is, of course, the voiceover to the manga character that was inspired by Seo that we were introduced to at the end of the episode, and that is Oze. And then we have +4 each for our multi-episode main character introductions. We obviously have the introduction of Makoto Mikoshiba, who was the inspiration behind Mamiko, as who is the main character of Nozaki's manga that he writes, and is a character who says things that he immediately regrets and gets embarrassed about, and also does all of like the flowers and effect backgrounds for Nozaki's manga when he has scenes where the main character needs to be surrounded by flowers or maybe like a light effect or like sparkles. He's the one who's going to put in those effects. We then have another 4 points for Yuzuki Seo, who of course is a really fun character, completely oblivious to herself and her surroundings, and basically just going through life authentically, and is an extremely talented singer who is famous within the choir or the choir club at the school for her amazing voice, and that is what makes Chio think that she would make a great manga character, though she expects her to be made into a charming character. At the end of the episode, we do find out that she, in fact, was made into a rather rude boy character in the manga because that honestly fits her character a lot better. And she is also incredibly likable in her own way as a character, mostly for her obliviousness. And this brings us to the final score, which is a 9 out of 10. So our season 1 ranking so far for the mostly objective ranking, in first place we have This Love dot 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 is being turned into a shoujo manga, and then second is this episode, Say Hello to the New Heroine. Now for my personal impressions of the episode, I thought this episode was really funny. And it was funny start to finish. Both of the new characters that were introduced are both comedic and likable. Mikoshiba, of course, has basically he says one thing, thinks another, but what he's thinking is so completely on his face. He gets super embarrassed, and it is adorable. And I think that Nozaki made a good call because when we see the scenes of Mikoshiba's behavior as the anime, or not as the anime, as the manga heroine, Mamako, he fits it to a T, and I think it's hilarious. I also love how he's like wandering around. He's like, I don't want to help you. But then he spends the next however long pacing around, glancing at Sakura, perking up every time she seems to be doing something new, hoping that she'll ask him something until eventually, like, Nozaki basically has to, like, go to Sakura and be like, please ask him something. He wants it so badly. And it was so cute to see. And while he is a very likable character, I feel like the star of the show was in the second half. Seo was absolutely hilarious, and especially her obliviousness, like every interaction that she has starts positively, and I also love that Sakura is completely oblivious to Seo. Like Nozaki, like upon first meeting, Sakura is like, I don't understand why people get angry at her so easily. Meanwhile, Seo then goes around and says things that makes people angry, including Nozaki, because she comments on how he's a giant up close and it's like annoying or something like that. Then, about the bag matching the tacky old guy neighbor after she's just been told she worked so hard on it. When she's playing the basketball, obviously she basically runs through, does everything on her own, and like her teammates are like, pass the ball here, and she's like, I can do this on my own. And it's like, I'm open, send me the ball. Nope, I can do this on my own. And then the girl who's observing from the bench is like, oh my gosh, I do things like that sometimes. I really need to stop and get better at that. And the other girl's like, but you were never that bad. And then we have, of course, as mentioned, with the notebooks, Nozaki gets upset that he gets dragged in to carry some of the notebooks as well. And she's like, "Oh," she interprets his face as, "Oh, I can't believe I'm stuck with such a cute girl. How will I ever, get through this?" And he's there like, that's not what he's thinking at all. And then she talks about herself, and again, she walks through a picture while saying that people ask her for help all the time. She says that she's considerate as she's actively ruining someone's poster. She says she can read situations really well as she basically bursts through the middle of a confession and an exchange of a love letter. And then she turns to Nozaki and she's like, I'm too perfect, aren't I? And it's just like, oh my gosh. But her obliviousness to her own self is hilarious. And then, of course, she is a very good singer at the end. Obviously, because that was a character trait, they hired a voice actor who was a very good singer. So he does observe her in the club. And it is so outside of what you would expect from the character that she shows all through the rest of the episode that Nozaki basically accuses her of being a fraud. And honestly, it was all very funny, and I very much enjoyed the episode. The first episode was good because, it was establishing the two main characters, but also the funniest thing about it was the singular event of the bike, whereas this episode, I felt like it had funny moments scattered throughout the entire thing to continue your enjoyment with Mikoshiba, but more so and especially with Seo, and of course because that was the second half of the episode, that's what's freshest in your mind when you end the episode, which is what leaves such a great impression. And that's why I decided to give it a 9 out of 10, putting it into first place on our season 1 ranking so far. Say hello to the new heroine, and then second is the premiere episode, This Love, dot dot dot, is being turned into a shoujo manga. That brings us to our series ranking so far, and on our mostly objective ranking, season 1 so far has 19 out of a possible 120 points. And on the personal side, season 1 currently has 17 points out of 120. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-Kun, episode 2, Say Hello to the New Heroine. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.